The thing you have with media sources is sometimes there's no real live fact check, so you can have people just claiming they're experts and then going on, and then what do they know? Oh, this guy's actually just some rando off the street.
Pretty much.
Dr. Oz.
What about Dr. Oz?
Andrew Hansen, why don't you introduce yourself? Ask us, or tell us why you decided to accept the invite to come on to this
And tell us how you heard
interesting
about us,
adventure of a show.
Yes, I am Andrew Hansen, and I am currently a radio, TV, film major and journalism minor at the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. And, you know, I've always had an interest in podcast, and it was my ex-girlfriend Julia Miller that actually told me about the podcast. So, shout out Julia, I guess. I think I remember you guys like making an announcement or something on Snapchat, but I haven't been following.
I've been trying to get Julia on the show, but she keeps denying.
Why?
Well, I mean, me and her are pretty good friends, but she's worried she doesn't necessarily have a topic to talk about. I beg to differ personally, but I don't know. maybe calling her out the way we just did will get her to change her mind.
Scare her.
Yeah.
I'm gonna shout her out every 15 minutes.
Yeah, we're calling you out, Julia. We need more women on this show. We've only had one.
It's true. And that was a good episode.
It was a good episode. I think one of our better ones.
Yeah. Well, we got some interesting topics today. We're gonna talk about, I guess you could say, Andrew's field of interest in the media.
News. Big news.
Big news.
Yeah.
And modern distrust in today's mainstream media.
Yeah, and we're going to tie that into the alternative media space and that topic afterwards.
Sid.
Yes.
What's your whole take on this here?
On distrust of the media?
Yeah. Well, it's not something that's new. Like, a lot of people have this common perception that it really caught fire this last election cycle. But I think one common fact is that it's been around since the beginning of this country. I mean, like, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington have been known haters of
by, like, two-party systems and stuff like that.
Yeah, or just like I don't know, not calling them out, but like trying to intimidate newspapers.
Yeah.
And calling them out for lies or term coin now, fake news, something like that. Yeah. So, like, why do you think it's gotten drastically worse is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, it's interesting because I think whenever there's a problem in the system, there'll be natural remedies that will come out of the woodwork to try to fix it. But then as the world changes, the powers that essentially were exploiting the medium of information to begin with will take advantage of those new, I guess you could say, means of information and then capitalize off them. So, like, obviously, mainstream media such as, like, CNN and MSNBC and Fox News all have the teams that they play for. And similar to what you said about how that phenomenon kind of started in the 80s of when news media started being more of a team sport sort of thing and less informational. A lot of people say that after the Nixon administration, a lot of that stuff started to bud because...
well, he would first coin the term mainstream media.
Yeah, and a lot of Republicans back then felt as though they needed a media of their own to counteract what they viewed as the railroading of Richard Nixon. So that eventually led to Fox News, and obviously we're pretty far away from the whole Richard Nixon thing right now, so things have changed quite a bit, but at the end of the day, the media that basically railroaded Richard Nixon with that information, which obviously isn't really railroading because he was guilty as hell, but they have kept that sort of attitude with they jump on whatever they jump on whatever negative coverage of their opponent that they can and whatever positive coverage of their person that they can, and vice versa. So I almost see like where we're at right now with like Fox and MSNBC are essentially like mirror images of each other doing the exact same thing for their team. You know what I mean? And that's why I don't necessarily like the idea of people dogpiling on one media source and saying one media source is bad, because I think all media, especially
They
since
all have their own biases.
yeah, and especially because they're funded by people who have agendas, and the fact that you know how there's like limits to how much you can donate to a campaign. I think we've talked about this before, how you can get around this, where if your buddy is with a media station, you essentially can bypass that and get unlimited free advertising and positive coverage, and that does way more than any amount of money into your campaign could ever do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And but because people have caught on to that game after a while, we start to see independent journalists try to free themselves of being subservient to, like, I guess you could say, the donor class and the corporate media, which is where the internet plays the role and why we have so many alternative media spaces these days. But what I find interesting is, in the alternative media, the top dogs in alternative media are still backed by the big corporations and indirectly backed by the parties. But I think that's that adaptation I was talking about, with when the people try to counteract the fact that all the media has agenda, you eventually see the people with those agenda like latch on to the new media and take control of them. And what's interesting about the internet is, since it's basically unlimited TV channels, there's always new media sources coming out, and ones that might have been independent for a while can get latched on at any moment, which is why you see something that started out very independent, like the Young Turks, essentially being like a mirror image of like MSNBC, but on the internet now.
Yeah.
Even though they obviously have a different way that they operate and a slightly different agenda, it still eventually becomes something very closer to that. And why even something that seems a lot more casual, like Louder with Crowder, eventually gets backed by the Koch brothers and sponsored by Glenn Beck and stuff like that. And I don't know, that's just the way that I guess capitalism operates. It's always going to try to latch on to what's profitable, especially when the profits are tied to the narrative.
And that's the point I was trying to make earlier, is that broadcast news cares a lot more about profits, and what equals profits is ratings. So the innovation in the early 2000s that a lot of news organizations came up with was to create conflict where there is none. And how they do this is you put one side against another. In the case of most mainstream news outlets, what they would do is frame the liberal voters versus the conservative voters. So it's what that does is it takes responsibility away from those that are in power and puts it on towards like the American people. So it's not anymore, oh, we're not getting any progress done because, you know, liberals can't take their head out of the sand, get out of la la land, or we can't get anything done because Republicans are living in the 60s. It takes responsibility away from those in power.
Yeah, and one thing I do want to ask you about, because you talked about how they create conflict where there is none, and they certainly like to amplify it and make it more like, make it feel more like a sports situation where like I have my side and
It's
here's
my
the
team
other
versus
sides.
your team, yeah.
But I mean, that conflict still very much exists. The reason that there's, I guess you could say, separated media space to begin with is because if let's say I'm very conservative and I'm watching MSNBC, I'm going to get very upset with the narrative and then the way they spin everything. So I'm going to be less likely to want to watch that. So if that was the only media, then I probably just wouldn't watch the media, which is why you have like the media on the other side is rising up and trying to take the, I guess you could say, that customer base that wouldn't watch the other side and cater to that. You know what I mean? So I don't know if the conflict's entirely artificial, but I do think they do frame it a particular way. That's why when you look at Fox News, they have Juan Williams, who's essentially a token liberal for them to dunk on.
Yep.
And CNN does the same thing. I don't know the name of the guy, but they have like an older white gentleman who's essentially their trumper, and they like dunk on him as much as they can, and they frame conversations to make him look stupid. And these pundits who serve as the people who get dunked on a media outlet that's essentially against their point of views are probably aware of that, but whether they view it as, you know what, I'm still fighting for my side in this space, even though I am going to be portrayed a way that doesn't necessarily help my side, or whether they're just in it for the money and selling out, I can't really say. It's probably a little column A, a little column B.
Helps that, yeah, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably.
I mean, yeah. And it's funny because when you listen to like somebody like Juan Williams be confronted by somebody in like CNN, and they're like, well, you basically work for a propaganda network. You just know that Juan Williams wouldn't agree with that point if he wasn't working with Fox, but because he works for Fox, he has to say, I disagree with that.
Yeah, they frame questions in a specific way where you can only answer it, and you make yourself look bad no matter what. You lose no matter what.
And I guess my main problem with the mainstream media is they essentially are tied to having to say a specific thing, and going out of that box, they risk being fired or risk being moved around to like a lower slot. Yeah.
It's a common industry thing, yeah.
But obviously when you get to the top, you can actually say things against your network and kind of get away with it. There was recently a whole thing with how Tucker Carlson said something that cut against Sean Hannity's narrative, and Sean Hannity has the show right after him.
Yep.
And Hannity was already live, and he like butts into Tucker's show to like basically say like, because Tucker said something about Jeff Bezos.
Yep.
And Hannity was like, being like the capitalist that he is, like was basically there simping for Jeff Bezos and coming to his defense and being like, well, he's a capitalist. And Tucker's like, but that doesn't invalidate any of my criticisms. And then Hannity didn't really know what to say, so he kind of left. And then he apologized on a freaking Daily Caller thread, which is like Tucker's like freaking co-founded news source, which I think it's really funny because he felt the need to apologize. And whether or not that was completely up to Hannity, or if that was up to pressures of people higher up basically saying, hey, I know, Tucker was the one cutting against the majority of the Fox narrative, but since he has more viewers than Hannity, Fox has to do a little 180 and basically be like, I know Tucker cut against our core narrative, but he gets most of our views, so our core narrative has to cater to him now.
Yeah, well, they're both extremely viewed shows for their time slots. Like
Hannity used to be the
losing
top
one
dog.
or the other, whether it be Tucker or
they're not gonna fire either. It's certainly not gonna happen.
No.
But
that's why he gets all those secret vacations that he goes on.
Tucker?
Yeah.
That might also be the fact that he got his head writer got into some hot water.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And I don't like hearing stuff like that. I'm going to be real with you. I do watch some Tucker Carlson segments, and I do like some of them, and I disagree with some of them. And I also understand the main criticism of him, that he basically, like, essentially pushes an anti-immigration and xenophobic agenda. And I get that criticism. However, I don't necessarily like the idea that just because he pushes an agenda that pushes through for a particular strong policy when it comes to immigration, attributing basically nefarious motives to him. But when he has a head writer who is seen on racist forums get fired, it does make me question the motives of a show like that.
Yeah.
And I think things like this coming out, like this guy's name, I think it's Jeff Zucker. He's the head of CNN and basically controls that. He's been apparently he holds all CNN shows on a pretty tight leash of what they can and can't say, and was part of the reason why many CNN anchors were pushing the Russia narrative more than even they would like to.
Yeah, and that's the problem with a lot of broadcast news, is that these anchors and reporters in the field are more fed talking points, and they're not really thinking for themselves. They don't get to, and it's not that they don't want to, it's just that if they do that, they're going to end up getting blacklisted. If they say the wrong thing at the wrong time, live on air, you're not going to get a job in the field ever again.
Yeah, and this actually relates to what because we talked about the show Rising before we went on air here. And for anybody unfamiliar, Rising is a show on the Hills YouTube channel, and it's hosted by Crystal Ball, and Sagar, is it Agente or something?
I feel like it's
Something
something with an
like
A.
that.
Something with an A.
Well, it's an E.
Is it an E?
Yeah.
You want look it up right now?
It's like EJ something. But besides the point, I mean, anybody who knows the show knows who we're talking about. And it's essentially a bipartisan news show where they seem to have a pretty good freedom in what they can say on there. And from what I understand behind the scenes, some of their producers aren't very happy with some of the stuff they say.
It's
Oh,
a
yeah.
worse version of our show.
I wish, man.
Yeah, I think Crystal Ball even talked about how even before she was on Rising that she would get in trouble for some of the things she said as an MSNBC anchor.
Yeah.
So this show is a little bit more freeing for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that goes into why the alternative media space is so, like, I guess game changing for not only viewers because where an online internet space exists with infinite basically news sources, not only can I watch whatever I think is most informative and make my own assessments about the people giving me my information, it also lets these skilled pundits who are very good at political analysis and basically know their shit, it gives them a larger ability to actually say what they're going to say because they're not limited to the platform of mainstream
Yeah.
media.
Yeah.
They know they can find a job in these more alternative outlets because these alternative outlets are obviously looking for people going out of mainstream media and to a platform that's more freeing because it helps both of them.
There's
Yeah.
a lot more niches being filled, basically. A lot more people being able to access news that they
Yeah.
agree with.
But that feeds into the fact that even though there's more options for information, does that make the public more informed? I go back and forth because if I only subscribe to a couple niches and a couple pundits of like thought, then I'm essentially brainwashed by those viewpoints, and it's easier to shut out the rest of the viewpoints
You
coming
can create
from
echo
other media.
chambers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I am also a believer that a true informed person would put their foot in as many echo chambers as possible because it's only an echo chamber if
If you want it.
If you don't hear the other side.
yeah. If like your media consumption walls you off of other media consumption.
Yeah.
And with the internet, you're allowed to basically create a more free-flowing spectrum of what you watch and get information more catered to what you like and fill in more blind spots.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a good thing that we have the internet, but I think in that alternative media space, and I think it actually will, in the long run, help the trust of the media. But the problem is there's that ongoing battle that I talked about with the mainstream media trying to take over that, which is why NBC gave millions and millions of dollars to like Vox,
Yep.
because they're trying to influence that and put their profit and motive narratives into that alternative media space.
And the other thing with alternative media and media in general is I think it's actually outlined perfectly by the pandemic we're having now is when you have so many voices, people can be confused about like what they're hearing. It's like essentially a information overload where you don't really know what's going on. I mean, for the first couple of weeks of the pandemic, it was just like, what the fuck is anyone doing, you know?
Yep.
So,
Yep.
Yeah,
Even now, in the pandemic, it's still an information.
it's an information overload.
You get one side saying, hey, we are in the midst of another crisis that we got to figure our shit out real quick. And then you got another side saying, hey, relax. Everything's going to be just fine. We'll get through it fairly quickly. Don't trust what the other side is telling you. And all of that, especially, I'm just going to keep referring to this situation, it takes away from, like, the experts' point of views. Like, you have political commentators saying their opinions, and then they're saying, like, hey, like at the beginning of the pandemic when Fox had a graphic where there are 0 coronavirus cases in the U.S. and it was Sean Hannity going off, we have nothing to worry about. And then you have, like, other experts behind the scenes, not even affiliated with Fox or any mainstream media source, just, you got to be alarmed. You need to keep an eye out, stay safe. And then now we get to this point, and what's changed? Probably nothing. You have experts kind of getting a talking platform, but then you have one side that is just trying to shut them out. and saying, "Hey, what does he know?" But really,
Well, I think you're always going to get that as long as you have the, I guess you could say, large corporate media hive minds
Yeah.
trying to influence the narrative. But, I mean, with the whole thing about experts, obviously, if somebody is very knowledgeable about a field, we should still value their opinion. But the problem is the confines of what the corporate media overlords, if you will, what they pour their money into doesn't necessarily need to be pundits. Like, they can very well get to experts too, and
no, I know, but it's like they choose not to sometimes.
yeah, but they do whenever it benefits them. And I think this also is part of the reason why people mistrust experts, because the fact that experts can get corrupted and then can say things that otherwise they wouldn't say. You know what I mean? And I think that's why there's a distrust for even people like Fauci, which I'm not saying that you should distrust Fauci, but I'm saying, like, when clearly he has a career that is intertwined
Impeccable.
with politics and shit like that, as well as the medical field, because he's been involved in politics a while too. Clearly, he still has an incentive to cater to, I guess, political administrations and political sides and play that game in addition to playing the game of spreading information about his field that he's an expert in.
Just because he's been in and around politics doesn't mean he has to cater to, or he is catering.
But you're right, it doesn't mean that, but it raises the question of whether or not he is. I mean, you kind of get where I'm coming from?
Kind of.
And I have a lot of respect for Dr. Fauci personally. And the fact that he's still involved in the Trump administration, despite the fact that they've had their back and forth, but they're still willing to work together on things, I think that earns a lot of respect in my book.
I don't think they've been on speaking terms for a while, since
I have heard that,
yeah.
yes.
H.W. Bush called him a hero. What year was, I don't remember the year, and then I don't remember the year, and then he was awarded Medal of Honor by W. Bush. I mean, if we're gonna say that his expertise is twisted because
I'm not necessarily saying it is, but I'm just using him as a stand-in for other experts, because let's be real, there's a lot less prominent, more sketchy experts whose opinions can be twisted by, I guess you can say, media sources and their own opinions.
The thing you have with media sources is sometimes there's no real live fact check, so you can have people just claiming they're experts and then going on, and then what do they know? This guy's actually just some rando off the street.
Pretty much.
Dr. Oz.
What about Dr. Oz?
He's a prime example. Going on Fox News before all this started, and just that would fit into your category of getting twisted, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just like to reiterate, the only reason I use Fauci as an example is because he's a prominent expert, probably the most prominent expert at all.
Right now,
right now. And regardless of the content of what he's saying, there is a lot of people who don't seem to trust him. And that may be very well not warranted at all. In fact, I think most of the mistrust towards him is not warranted. But that being said, we have to ask ourselves, why is there this trust that's not warranted? Like, because we get in this position where people don't trust the experts, and I view that as a problem regardless of what the experts are saying. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that there's mistrust for experts. And then you got to ask yourself why there's mistrust for experts.
Yeah.
Because I don't like that, and I assume you don't like that.
No, absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Yeah, we kind of went off on a tangent there.
I mean, yeah, but that's what this is.
Yeah.
Part of the game.
True.
Part of the game.
Yeah.
I think it's good to hash things out, and I don't think an apology is necessary, Hunter, although I do appreciate it, nevertheless.
So, we have come this far in an election cycle again. Media is another topic of discussion throughout the current administration. If there was at all a way you could fix mainstream media, what's the first point you would go to?
That is a tough one.
Would it be the very top? Or would it be like outside donors?
And that could be a start, I guess, but the problem is I mean, the money has to come from somewhere. So even if you cut out outside donors and then they had less of a sway on it, you would still have the exact point Andrew brought up to begin with, which is if they have to completely rely on consumers for funds, then they're going to start not working information. They're gonna start working narratives that get views. You know what I mean?
I don't know if I'd have a broad general solution for how we could fix mainstream media, but I do know that in current times, people should just try and diversify their media consumption. Just don't take information from one place. Like you shouldn't only watch Fox News and read the New York Post, or only watch CNN and read Huffington Post. You know, you gotta diversify your consumption.
And you have a hell of an opportunity to do that, given today's day and age. Back then, it was absolutely nothing, but...
Which, this actually reminds me of people who are basically trying to stealthily be something they're not in order to give people the illusion that they're diversifying their, I guess you can say, news base and what they're getting from, but... So, like, Dave Rubin, for example, calls himself a classical liberal.
I thought it was libertarian. Didn't he always say libertarian?
Classical liberal, then libertarian.
Yeah.
And now he recently said when talking to Michael Knowles that he's a conservative. Now this could be a genuine shift over to conservatism that slowly happened. I'm not completely saying that it's out of the realm of possibility, but it does make you question the fact that he has had a lot of right-wingers on his platform for this entire time that he's calling himself a classical liberal. And you can see people in his comment section being like, why are people trying to deplatform this liberal when it's like, it's a little dishonest to call Dave Rubin like a liberal, you know what I mean?
I will say the thing about Dave Rubin, he does a good job with his interviews.
I think so too.
Most of his interviews, he tosses up softball questions to people no matter what side of the aisle they're on, and I respect that.
Yeah, he's like, look, and different interviewers have different roles. You don't have to be a hard interviewer every single time you interview somebody. I think there is a place for people like Dave Rubin in the media space, and that's a little bit of a controversial point. But I mean, I still think so. I think there's a place for most people in the media space. Where I start to get a little bit like, I guess you'd say iffy about that point I just made about places for everybody in the media spaces, then somebody would be like, what about neo-Nazis? Is there a point for them in the media space? And that obviously gets a lot edgier, and that's a harder question to answer.
And that's the thing with a lot of online internet pundits is you don't have an instant fact check. So you may be getting fed information that is wholeheartedly false, and in the moment, it might just sit in the back of your brain and you not realize, like, hey, this is not true.
Another thing off of that, like, there was just a story, I think it was yesterday, that Twitter just suspended, like, 70,000 QAnon accounts.
Yeah, QAnon's wild, bro.
Crazy.
Yeah. In complete honesty, I don't know too much about that conspiracy nonsense other than the fact that...
I'll tell you one funny...
They're like 4chan trolls, but other than that sort of stuff, I don't know too much about them.
Like, the Pizzagate conspiracy, the sex trafficking ring under the pizza joint with the Clintons, remember that?
I mean, yeah. Supposedly there's Clinton emails where she's talking about pizza, and it just seems like it doesn't make any sense.
I think the word pizza was referenced, and I think that's a code word, if I remember correctly.
Obviously, it doesn't need to be a code word for sex trafficking. I think that is a little like jumping.
It's exciting because there's a thrill that people get to knowing information that other people don't know. It's like you're on a higher level. So I think that's the thing with.
Can I finish my story quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
Go.
It's the guy the apparent pizza joint that is where the sex trafficking ring is being ran, this guy shows up with a gun, walks in, fires at the ceiling, tells everyone to come out. Once he realizes and goes down to the basement that nothing's going on, just starts like crying.
That's pretty nuts.
And realizing he messed up.
That's
harmful, man.
That's what I'm saying. That's the danger of those platforms.
That's that thrill you get of finding out that information. That's why conspiracy theories are so dangerous for some people.
We saw a similar situation with Alex Jones and the Sandy Hook shooting, where people were going to victims' houses and yelling at them and screaming that they were just corporate actors. So.
And misinformation can definitely be harmful so this really, I guess, brings up, I guess you could call it a utilitarian approach to free speech is essentially what's being pondered today in America, which I think we've talked about this on the podcast before, but I'll reiterate because it's been a while since we've gone down this road. The difference between utilitarian and Kantian ethics, and it's a big part of basically making any political decision, because usually one side takes the utilitarian approach and usually one side takes a more Kantian approach. Kantian ethics has to do with there's a rule that you can't break because breaking that rule is inherently bad. So like in the free speech debate, that would be violating anybody's free speech is inherently a line you shouldn't cross, and therefore regardless of your motives, you shouldn't violate somebody's free speech. The utilitarian would say that certain speech, because utilitarians are all about maximizing
the best good,
the best outcome for the most amount of people. So they would say some speech actually leads to bigger problems and suppresses other people's free speech in the long run, such as platforming a neo-Nazi might foster a community of people that's going to silence more people's free speech in the long run, and therefore, in order to ensure free speech, we have to take that person's ability of speech away from them to a degree. And this is still a topic that I'm pondering because I definitely don't like it when people who have extreme viewpoints use their platform in a harmful way. But that being said, it's very easy to see how a slippery slope can play into this when you start banning people and you keep moving the goalpost on what's acceptable and what's not.
It's like what are you allowed to question, right?
Yeah.
But these people are given, they have a much larger platform. This is a bigger problem than it would have been 15, 20 years ago. You have these QAnon followers, I think there is now a dozen on ballots in November. They could have a seat representing a large group of people.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting. I did not hear about this.
Yeah.
But
where at?
I'll have to find out what states, but I think there's a couple. Florida. Let's see. You guys talk. I'll find them.
Yeah, I could see Florida. That's funny.
The Florida men.
Yeah. I feel like we have a similar situation where I live. Lakeland people. Lakeland people are the same thing as Floridan people. I work at a gas station, so I see all types of these characters.
Yeah, and
little off topic, but
no, I got you. I mean, it's like the thing you were talking about, how some people don't want to wear a mask because for some reason that's an arbitrary line.
Yeah,
I
don't
they decide not to cross for who God knows what reason.
It seems like to me that people think wearing a mask is like a political statement. Like if you wear a mask, you must be a liberal or something like that. But we're in the middle of a pandemic. Like this is just, I wear a mask because I want to get back to normal. Like I care about freedom and I want to be able to get back to normal life. That's why I wear a mask. And because experts say that it will help, so I'll wear a mask. It's not that bad.
Five. Wow, Florida isn't actually on here. My bad. 5 in California. And then there's 1 in Colorado, Georgia, Ohio, Oregon, and Texas. So 10 total, not 12.
Weird how a lot of those are left-leaning states. That's pretty interesting. They won't make it very far. I don't even think they'd make it far.
Well, they're on the ballot.
On the ballot is not
as
a big
Republicans.
Deal. It's not a big deal though. A Republican probably isn't going to win those seats.
That's true. Well, you don't know.
I mean,
there are a lot of very red counties in California.
I suppose.
I don't know how hard it is to get on. I'm not educated in this, but I do know that you can get some pretty wacky candidates on there. There was a guy.
Easy, believe me.
I think there was a guy who was named Shoe on his head or something, and he had a giant boot. You know.
First of all, that guy's playing a character.
Yeah.
And he
But did he get on the ballot at least, or was
he
it?
He might have. You're talking about Vermin Supreme.
Yeah, it's Vermin Supreme.
And the wacky things he said he does not believe. It's a parody.
Like everyone gets a horse. You know?
Yeah, it's a parody of a libertarian, and supposedly that guy actually leans quite left, from what I've been told.
Does he have a serious platform? Is he
I've seen him on serious YouTubers, usually people who are pretty far left, and he has talked to them.
Yeah, that's funny.
And I haven't actually watched him talking to a lot of these people, but I have seen him in thumbnails of Vosh videos. Who's a pretty big socialist advocate, and so that leads me to believe that Vermin Supreme's like platform is like supposed to be a parody of like. I'm not even sure if it's a parody of a libertarian. I think that's what he ran on in one thing as a libertarian, but that might also be because their standards of getting on the ballot might be lower. I don't really know too much about him. I just know that he's essentially his image was essentially warning about the type of politics that we have now with bombastic characters like Donald Trump and people like Kanye entering politics. Like, it was almost like a warning of how like wacky politics can be. So it's a little deeper than it first seems. He's not just some crazy wacko.
He's actually trying to send a message.
Yes, from what I understand, I haven't seen him talk out of character too much, and I'm not sure how often he does talk out of character. But I do know for a fact that he's playing a character.
Hope so. Unless he goes home as Vermin Supreme.
I'm pretty sure he's playing a character, like 90% positive.
You never know in today's day and age. Well, shall we move on?
I don't know, I think we had a...
Should we talk about Twitter? I want to talk about Twitter.
Oh yeah, social media. We forgot all social media.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we talked about echo chambers earlier. Mm-hmm. I think those play a big role in getting people who get news from Twitter, because it's a lot easier to just ignore things you don't like. You can block people. You can just not follow people or ignore people. Mm-hmm. So,
well, I guess that would be the same with any other social media platform.
Twitter is.
But like Reddit, for instance.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, that's what I was. Twitter, Reddit, Facebook. I think all social media platforms in general have that problem where you can kind of just ignore things that you don't agree with at all. It's super easy, and to me, it's just sort of wholeheartedly unrealistic, because that's not how the world works. Like, you can't just like, oh, I don't like what you're saying, I'm just gonna block you. Like, these people still exist. Like, they still have voices. Yeah, you can't just tune people out and they're gonna go away.
What about the people who try to deplatform people? They are trying to make people go away. They're not just trying to block them.
Like cancel culture.
Yeah,
no, I don't agree with that at all. I think that's, I mean, in like you were saying with the utilitarian
approach to free speech.
Yes, and the other one?
Kantian approach to
Kantian,
free speech.
yes. I think it's, in this case, it's not all are, it's not a black and white case. You can't just look at someone and be like, they're saying things. You have to look at someone on a case-by-case basis. If someone's saying something that is, could be damaging and that has no form of fact-check system in place, I think maybe deplatforming them, maybe, I don't know. I'm torn on this issue, honestly.
Same. That's why I didn't pick a side. That's why I laid out what basically the two options are.
Because on one hand, it's like you don't want people to believe dangerous ideals that can lead to infringing upon the rights of another human being. But at the same time, you don't want to go down that slippery slope of, you can't talk anymore. We're going to shut this person up. We don't like what you're saying. We're going to shut this person up. And I think the stance that most of these social media organizations take is that they are a company, that they can do what they want. They don't have to follow by any specific rules. So definitely, I think
they have policies you have to abide by.
They have but it's not like they're not legally, like, I think Twitch just banned Dr. Disrespect No Reason.
Oh yeah.
They don't. There's probably a reason, but
they're not going to. I think the real reason, a tangent here, but I think the real reason is because they wanted to get out of $1 million contract with him. But
really?
That's.
Some people think it's because he kept bringing up. I forget the guy's name, but he kept bringing up a conspiracy theorist.
I know he was talking about. Oh, he was talking about the 5G cell towers and coronavirus.
But he was also talking about a specific. It was David something, I think. And he mentions it in the stream like 5 minutes before he gets banned. His wife was reading a book written by, I think it's like David Locke or something like that. He was reading. He was starting to get into following this conspiracy theorist who was banned from YouTube. And Twitch takes their censoring very seriously. So like YouTube, for instance, let's say hypothetically I'm banned from YouTube.
Yeah.
And
David Icke.
I don't know why I said Locke. But you get the idea. But that's the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say I get banned from YouTube and somebody else on YouTube platforms me like I'm on somebody else's YouTube show, that's okay. That's allowed. However, on Twitch, if I'm banned from Twitch, I can't go on somebody else's Twitch stream or they get banned. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So the mere mentioning of this guy might have been grounds for termination. That's a working theory, but nobody really knows.
Yeah, there's many theories up in the air. I think Keemstar came up with his theory that I subscribe to is that Mixer, Keemstar, yeah.
Yeah, I know. He's just a bombastic character.
I don't. You know what I think about it? That's probably the only time I'm gonna say Keemstar. That's an idea I subscribe to. But anyways,
True.
So.
Hey, even a broken clock.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So Keemstar proposed the idea that Dr. Disrespect had a multi-million-dollar deal with Twitch to stay on the platform instead of going to Mixer, which is now out of business. And so Twitch, in order to save themselves...
Well, it just got bought, didn't it?
What?
Didn't it just get bought?
I thought it was down.
I thought Facebook bought it.
Very possible. I don't know too much about this.
But Keemstar says that they didn't want to, since Mixer's no longer like a possibility, they just banned him and they won't give an explanation. They'll come up with some reason later on just so they can get out of the contract.
But what's interesting is even Dr. Disrespect isn't saying anything, and I wonder why not.
Well, I don't know. I think he said that there's still no reason, and he made a video the other day of him he made a video the other day of.
But he brings in a lot of revenue for Twitch. I find it hard to believe Twitch is losing money on a multi-million-dollar contract.
He's the face of Twitch. I mean, I don't know how much money Twitch makes, but it just seems to me like.
But that's what I'm saying. Even if they were giving him millions of dollars, it seems like
why wouldn't they come up with a reason though? Is my thing. That just makes the most logical sense. That they're not gonna say, "Hey, here's why," and he doesn't know why.
Because then it gets questioned, and then you get more backlash and bad publicity.
Some people thought maybe it had to do with a sexual allegation, but I don't think that's true at this point. And the reason I don't say that's true at this point is because his wife still supports him. But the reason that was originally the theory was because of the stuff with the Smash community going on. I don't know if you've heard about this, but the Smash Ultimate pro gaming community had a lot of sexual predators that got exposed in it recently.
Even more. Smash community and all of EVO, which is like the Super Bowl for fighting games. So.
Really?
Yeah.
That's horrible.
Yeah, it's pretty. It was like a large majority. It was like it started with the head organizer of EVO, Evolution Tournament. His name is Mr. Wizard, and it started with him basically.
I love online names.
It's kind of he paid.
Freaking Mr. Wizard and Dr.
He paid little kids basically in arcade tokens back in the day to drop down to their trousers and do weird dares and stuff. So. And then from there, just like everybody started saying things. So
gross.
Well, the issue is when you become a professional gamer, a lot of these people are like not completely developed neurologically.
Oh, absolutely.
When they become a pro gamer,
easily
because fighting games are very hard for the record. Like a lot of them.
It's like a job. It really is.
Yeah. Well, like video games in general, like pro video gaming, it is all a job. But like fighting games specifically involve very rigorous reflexes and like I know it sounds like a meme, but
I know you are. I've played.
As a big fan of fighting games, I can tell you it is more than any game. It is like a job because you have to practice. If you want to be good, you have to practice almost every single day, and just to get even acceptable.
So you have these kids who essentially have been playing fighting games their whole life, who didn't even think there would be a job in it, who randomly have people come up to them, paying them ridiculous amounts of money that they didn't think they'd ever get for playing fighting games. Next thing they know, they're celebrities with thousands of people watching them on Twitch, and girls, many of whom are underage, in DMs, who are basically saying like, "Hey, I like you," and doing stuff like that. And that power probably gets to their head, and then, obviously not defending these people, but if these people probably didn't have success with the ladies prior to this, so they come from a place of insecurity, so then it's very easy for them to rationalize in their head, even if they're not a particularly bad person, to be like, "Oh, I'm not grooming this girl, I'm just like talking to them," and the next thing you know, they like groomed this girl. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And obviously some are a lot more nefarious than others. Some are probably full on like taking advantage of people and raping them, while others are doing more of the situation of what I just described. And that's why it's such an epidemic, because you have these people who went into it at a young age, weren't really prepared for this amount of fame off of this, and suddenly had girls willing to drop their pants for them. You get what I'm saying? And
Disgusting.
it makes sense from a psychological level why this would happen. Is basically what I want to point out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think there was one case where one Smash player met a girl off of Tinder, and they hooked up, and she came out later and then said she was underage. But his defense is that you have to be 18 plus to be on Tinder, and he believes that he shouldn't be.
That's decent defense, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe he did know she was underage. It boils down to it's like a lottery game. What did he know and when did he know it? It's a messy situation.
It sucks too, because man, there's not gonna be any cool competition now that Evo's canceled, because all the game companies pulled out off of these allegations. There's not gonna be any competitions anytime soon.
Yeah.
We'll clean it out.
I mean, it's probably good that they're doing this purge, because I imagine
Yeah.
the gaming companies.
You can't let it keep going on.
Well, for sure. And not only that, these gaming companies, it's not like they want to see the death of the fighting game scene. They want it to come back. So they are doing. This is the last thing they want to do is pull out of all this. So they're going to revitalize it. They're going to try to get better people in on the scene, and I imagine there's going to be normal workplaces where you have sexual conduct videos on how to behave appropriately. I imagine they're probably going to roll these out targeted at pro gamers, and they'll have to sign shit, and they'll have to be educated in these, and
fighting games are already something that nobody wants to get into, because it's you have to put in a lot of work to even make good. You're more than likely, if you just hop in and play, you're gonna get your ass kicked.
But
so having these allegations and just not doing anything about it makes it even harder, because it's I don't want to get into a community where there's half the people playing are pedophiles. No one wants to be involved.
That being said, there's still plenty of prominent fighting game players who were not hit with allegations, and
they'll have no trouble finding more players.
Yeah, but they definitely won't. But it's just funny because it hurts the people who basically doing the right thing the whole time, because no doubt the fact that they're even associated with this community is going to hurt their reputation. But I have a large amount of respect for the people who were doing what they were supposed to the whole time and weren't doing anything wrong, and I'm sure their careers will survive. But either way, it still sucks that they have to take some of the repercussions of this situation when they themselves did nothing wrong, and it was just other people in the space.
Yeah, that's true. Well, that was a good little
That was a
conversation.
tangent.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't intend to talk about this, but it was big news. And
Yeah.
I mean,
You guys should get a tangent alarm, tangent.
That's a good
not a bad idea. But I mean, here's another thing. I think tangents are good, and this actually goes back. I'm bringing it full circle, which is a thing I do a lot. This goes back to our thing about mainstream media and why mainstream media kind of sucks. Because people like Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, David Pacman, Kyle Kalinske, all of the, regardless of what side they're on, what do? They talk long form. They have unlimited time to talk about what comes to their mind, and they're not controlled by we have 10 minutes on air with this guy and this guy. Talk for 5 minutes while I talk over you for the rest of it. That completely subverts anything productive. And when we have the ability to go on tangents and form these naturally free-flowing conversations, not only are they more engaging to listeners, in my opinion, makes for more enjoyable content, it also makes for, you can actually see what they're about. It's not this fake plastically molded, like what you said, ramming two sides up against each other for views. It's not that. It's a lot more of a free-flowing.
I think people see that. I think people see that the news they're being fed, especially mainstream news. I'm not going to say print journalism, because not all print, especially print journalism, is generally better than broadcast.
No
and
doubt.
I'll get into that. But when you look at, lost my train of thought. Oh, yeah, when you get into broadcast journalism, you're going to have people that are on there for a set amount of time, and they have to get their point across in 10 minutes or less, so that's not enough time to elaborate enough on the intricacies of today's social issues,
Yeah.
especially when you have people on there that are being told to interrupt, get more questions out, get more questions out, get more questions, and to create conflict. You know?
And then the people who are there with less nefarious intentions are forced to stoop to the other person's level if they want to get their words in.
Yeah.
And that's why it's interesting to watch people like David Pakman or Kyle Kalinske go on like Fox News and have to participate in that environment. And it's the same thing when you watch people like, you could use an example of like Ben Shapiro going on CNN. It's like the same thing.
Yeah.
Just different side having the different sides of the platform, you know?
Yeah. And so the reason, I think I said it earlier, but the reason I think that print journalism is significantly, and radio journalism is significantly better than broadcast journalism is because you don't have as much time, or you don't have as much time to get your point across, and the news producers are thinking about ratings of what gets people talking, and if you're boring but you're right, people aren't going to watch. You know, it's just that simple. People don't care, about stats and whatever if it doesn't pertain to them specifically. They don't care about what happens in other countries. It's about what's happening right now, right here in front of you.
And the other thing with stats, like, even if they did care about stats, it's very easy for me to say a stat, not have to back it up, and just keep going.
In 1 ear,
just keep going. And even if it is a real stat, it's very possible to make basically any study I want say whatever I want.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why even when studies are being used correctly...
We're seeing it right now. Yeah,
even when studies are being used correctly, people won't believe them.
Yeah.
Which is why another thing that feeds into my point about why people would trust an expert like Dr. Fauci. It has nothing to do with what he's saying. It's just what has happened to expertise and statistics and studies in general. Like it's just like in freaking elementary school. One kid ruins it for everybody. You know what I mean, though?
Yeah, that's true.
You don't even have. You can suffer the consequences and not even have anything to do with the thing that's making you suffer the consequences. Mm-hmm. And that's just how it works. Now, one thing I just wanted to fit in before we wrap up or go to the next topic. I don't know what
I was just thinking we don't have to cover what we were talking about because if we're gonna have him on,
bonus
might
episode.
as well do it with him, right? Because it was his idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, what?
The next.
Oh yeah. Okay. Ignore that. It's spoilers, boys.
Yeah.
It's spoilers.
Yeah.
But one last thing I would like to just mention is REP Michael Brooks. I just got into him. And for those who don't know, Michael Brooks is the co-host of the Majority Report with Sam Snyder, or Sneeder, however you say it. And he also had the Michael Brooks Show, which I actually prefer to the Majority Report, to be completely honest. And he was, I guess you could say, kind of like a left-wing socialist commentator. And I think he was a really smart guy, very genuine. He recently died of a medical condition at the age of 36. I think it was like a blood clot in his neck. But the details of this are like unknown. It was an unexpected thing that came out of nowhere. And I just felt the need to mention something about it and basically say that I respected, even though I don't agree with that guy on everything, I respected what he did and his contribution to the alternative media space. I watch a lot of alternative media, and I make that very clear from everything I say in this podcast and the wide variety of voices that I listen to, and I value every single one of them, and I would just like that to be respected, and I'm glad for the work he did while he was here, and yeah, that's pretty much that.
Yeah, rest in peace, John Lewis, too.
Who's that?
Congressman John Lewis.
Okay.
Civil rights giant.
Okay.
What was it, Tuesday that he passed? With long battle with cancer. 50 years of just straight, honestly fighting for something that he put his whole life into. And the fight was not over, and he realized that, and people will not let his memory or his cause for justice.
I don't think the fight's ever over when you're pushing a political agenda or a movement like civil rights.
Nope.
And so Michael Brooks' fight and John Lewis' fight still rages on,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm sure that their sides were happy to have both of them and what they did.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully they inspired people to basically take their place in these fights.
23 years old when he marched on Washington and spoke.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
You get started young, that's what that means.
Yep.
Get out and vote. That's the thing. I think
Yeah.
there's more than one election in this country. It's not just Joe Biden versus Donald Trump. You also got to think how did Tammy Baldwin get elected? How did all of our other
Yeah,
representatives get elected?
Tony Evers, everybody.
It all starts somewhere. Young people are some of the most powerful voices in the entire world.
Well, here's the thing. I wouldn't even necessarily say that they're the most powerful, but they have the most time. And I think development and building on your own platform and your voice as you go is like the most important thing. If you just start talking when you're older, you suffer the detriment of your voice not adapting. If you have a lot of time for your voice to adapt, that leads to more value in the long run. Although, for a lot of young people, it might not seem like your voice is that powerful right now because you're young. There's a lot of things you haven't learned yet. And a lot of the older people are the ones with the platforms.
Yep.
But if you don't start working at it now, you'll never get to the point in which they got to. All the people with platforms, like Ben Shapiro was writing articles when he was like freaking 18.
Mhm.
So, just a thing for people to remember.
Yep.
Freelance journalism.
Freelance journalism.
It's cool to have an actual person with journalistic, I guess you could say,
Yeah,
aspirations.
That's where most journalists get started. Like people think that if you want to be a journalist, you have to be hired by the New York Times or whatever. But no, most people get started by writing articles and sending them to these big organizations, and then they get accepted. And if they write, consistent work, then they get hired. So that's another thing I think with news is it's not always necessarily just the news papers or whatever's voice. It can also be just some random citizen on the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it could be what we're doing. Obviously, what we're doing has fairly low impact and low elevation at this point.
Oh, says you. Maybe one day though.
Yeah, but that's the
Maybe
thing. There's a reason we've been here for 21 episodes.
Yep.
Andrew. I didn't think we'd be doing it this long. We're doing this since February?
Yep.
It's been going pretty long, and I love doing it. I'm going to continue to do it.
Mhm.
I understand passions don't grow overnight. The same thing applies to my musical aspirations. When I first started making music, it was awful. It's still not the best, but it's a lot better now.
What kind of music do you make?
Experimental metal.
Okay.
I can show you some after the podcast.
Yeah, let's do it.
Check out my SoundCloud, Evil Hive Mind.
Evil what mind?
Evil Hive Mind.
Have?
Hive Mind.
Hive, as in beehive.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of the concepts we talk about on this podcast is actually the inspiration for the name. The fact that, have I talked about the super ego and the id on here with you before?
Sounds familiar.
That's
Yeah. So like the id is I guess you could say the primal part of you, the primal part of you that wants instant gratification, and in a lot of ways the worst part of you. You know
Okay.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
The super ego is the best possible version of you that you can strive to be, but will never be, no matter how hard you try. But that being said, you should still strive to get a little farther from the id every day and get a little closer to the super ego every day. But you have to live with the fact that the id will always follow you and never go
You
away.
have to respect it because you gotta eat, gotta sleep.
Yeah, gotta. And I mean, and your emotions will like your emotions will take over certain situations when people act like. That's why people act like asshats when things like sex are on the line. And that's why relationships are messy because of the id, essentially. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess the motivation behind the name of my band, Evil Hive Mind, is the abstract concept of putting the collective of everybody's id into basically saying, hypothetically, what if some evil demon or devil-like force was basically tapping into various people's consciousness when they act more like their id than their superego.
Yeah. That sounds like a Twitter bio. I'll make that your bio.
Damn. Deep stuff.
Yeah, I mean...
Thanks.
Yeah. But, I'm just geeking because I never thought I'd plug the SoundCloud on this podcast, TBH.
Hey, man.
It's like a separate thing, but... And, yeah, you know.
If they relate?
I mean, it's just that. I mean, obviously, when I'm talking about my worldview on here, and I'm talking about how we should consume information and trying to critically analyze things, obviously that bleeds a little bit into a creative project.
Absolutely, yeah.
So, even though they're not really connected, if they come from me, then I guess they're connected. Just like anything that comes from either of you guys are inherently connected.
Yeah.
Do you do anything to get into the creative flow of things?
trying to
Put you on the spot there.
Trying to think of an answer that I should say.
Hey,
But I guess to answer your question, what do I do to get in the creative space? Believe it or not, when I first start writing lyrics, I will improv and say whatever I think, and I actually decide what I wrote or what I said is about after I wrote it or said it. So I don't know. I feel like this is an impossible concept to explain unless I show you what a lot of my lyrics are. But I'll basically write stuff that sounds cool, and then I'll look at it afterwards and realize that even though I didn't necessarily have an intended point when I write it, there is indeed an intended point that comes from my soul and my overarching world view and just the way I am that is instilled into that.
Yeah.
And I essentially have a formula that doesn't feel very formulaic that comes out whenever I tap into it.
Yeah.
Like you're ripping lyrics from the ether or something.
Pretty much. It's and it was, yeah, I know. And honestly, that's how I think art should be.
From the ether, yeah.
Well, from your soul.
Yeah, from the ether. Same
Okay.
thing. No, not really. But
same difference.
No, I get what you mean, though, because even in the abstract concept of what I described the evil hive mind as, is that's, I even said, the worst parts of people, and even the best parts of people, this is why we have religion, can be attributed to an abstract concept. Jesus, in a lot of ways, represents the best possible man. We've talked about this in our deconstruction episode.
Yeah.
He represents the superego.
Yeah.
The devil kind of represents the id.
Mm-hmm.
Religions.
That's where we talk. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's where we talk
religions have just. And this is why I actually think religion is really cool, despite being agnostic. They essentially, got to psychological concepts way before psychology was ever a thing, and just explained it in a way that was, I guess, more holistic and easier for people to take as scripture and to live by. It was, and yeah, you get what I'm getting at.
Well, some exciting news though. Andrew here is gonna edit our videos. Be our new editor.
Yeah, this is really spur of the moment.
Yeah,
but
kind of just fell in our laps.
Yeah, so when Andrew initially told me that he was interested in the podcast, I hadn't talked to Andrew in years, so I was pretty whoa, okay, sure, I'll have him on. I'll have anybody on. Just let that be a reminder. We're
Yep.
pretty small at this
off
point.
the street.
Get on. But if you want to come on. But that being said, when we got down here and started talking to Andrew, he was critiquing our setup, critiquing a lot of the way we do things, and asking questions about how we would like to continue in the future, because we talked about our new YouTube channel, which you should definitely check out.
Yep.
It's
Subscribe.
Subscribe, and don't forget to hit that notification bell.
That's a double plug right there.
That's so high maintenance.
Boom, boom. SoundCloud and YouTube.
Yep.
Yeah. God, it's weird that I'm a guy who did no social media and still doesn't like social media
Me
personally.
neither, dude.
But the only reason I use social media is to plug creative projects, and I just think that I don't know.
And it's a great tool for it. So
It is a great tool, but
I think it can be a bit of an addiction, but
But that's the thing. Most people who are addicted to it aren't using it as a creative tool. They're using it to consume other people.
no. The other thing with that is, I think it's really easy to tell yourself some completely easily verifiable bullshit that I need to be on social media because I need to stay informed, I need to be up to date with things, when in reality you're just browsing, just scrolling Reddit for no reason, or
It's
reading some stupid tweet on
What's
Twitter.
hilarious about that is that's the same rationale for why people will get addicted to drugs.
You're like, oh, just
Yeah,
having a
I'm
good
just
time.
drinking socially.
Yeah, and then next thing you know, you're drinking alone.
Yeah, it's the same damn thing.
that's a good point.
And it's just funny
Yeah.
because addiction rationale is the same across all mediums. It's pretty funny.
I'll do meth just to stay up with my homework. Oh no,
Oh jeez, dude.
that's a real problem at my college actually, because
Wait,
when you're
actual meth or prescription?
yeah, no,
meth?
actual meth.
Just prescription meth.
yeah,
Disoxin.
for,
Look up disoxin.
For
Really?
ADD.
Yep, ADD.
Oh.
It's yeah. So if we were to rank strengths in the ADD medication, it would be Vyvanse, Adderall, Concerta / Ritalin, which is on the same tier, and then at the top would be, I already forgot the name of it. What did I say the prescription meth was called? Disoxin.
Disoxin.
Yeah.
Wow.
But kids. So when you're on meth, what I've heard, I don't know, but
Jesus.
so when you're on meth, it can make like things that are not at all interesting, like calculus, for example.
that's how all
like
uppers work.
super
Yeah.
fucking interesting. So it's
Yeah, that's like how all uppers work. That's why people do coke to stay up and keep doing work.
Yep.
Like, why do you think people on Wall Street get addicted to coke?
Makes them focus and helps them
Yeah,
stay up to.
you get
Confident,
you
confident
get, you get what I'm
yeah,
saying.
confident. Yeah. Wolf of Wall Street. Great movie.
Well, we had another tangent right there, but going back to what we said before the tangent, Andrew's going to be our editor moving forward. I'd like to have him on board for a while. Our current YouTube videos uploaded are kind of low quality with no thumbnails right now, but from this point moving forward, I'd like them to have high quality thumbnails,
Yep.
to have good edited intros and outros, and I would like there to be clips kind of like the Joe Rogan podcast, so you don't have to sit through a whole podcast.
As would I. I would like that.
Yes. And now that Andrew's a part of this, I imagine he would also like the quality to be high.
Oh yeah, I take pride in the projects.
A lot of pressure on you.
Do I want to shout anything out? Let me think. I guess I'm doing a show that you can catch on some fucking platform. I don't know what, but called Breaking Sound in my college. If I know, I'll.
We'll plug you on the Twitter.
Boom.
Plug you on
There
the
you go.
Twitter. It'll
Yep.
happen.
Yeah, but it's a music talk show. We have local bands on, and they play music, and we also
that's
interview
super
them.
cool.
Yeah, I get to interview people. So.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Mhm.
Can you interview me?
Love
Good.
that.
Oh yeah, dude. If you want to come down to Oshkosh,
Sure. I mean,
How far away is that?
4 hours. Thinking. You'll be on TV, bro. You'll be famous.
Dude, if I actually have like decent music by then, I will totally do it. I think it's pretty decent now, but I'd like to get some better stuff before I do that.
I didn't want to say it before, but I've made movies with Jack Black. Will make you big.
What?
I make movies with Jack Black. You know Jack Black?
There's no way you make me with Jack Black.
Yeah, Kangaroo Kid. I made that movie.
What?
You ever seen Kangaroo Kid?
What is Kangaroo Kid?
Or not Kangaroo Kid. Kangaroo Jack. My bad.
There's no way you made Kangaroo Jack.
Yeah, I did. I'm the kangaroo.
Bro, stop lying. You had me going there.
Dude, I
I
like
knew
that, dude.
exactly what
Like
it was.
anybody else would be like, no, get out of here. Like, you're full of shit.
Dude, I'm a little gullible. I'm willing to admit I usually catch myself though. That's only because I'm like trusting and I'm like, I'm not just gonna assume
Yeah,
this guy's BSing out the gate, but then I like get more information like, all right, this guy's fucking with me.
Yeah.
I thought you were. It says it on the ceiling, actually.
I'm not looking out, bro.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
thought I
looking.
might be like, yeah, but
No, I'm. Now you got me alert, bro. You're not getting me.
Alert about what? The thing on the ceiling? All right, we should probably end this.
Yeah, before we.
All right, well, thanks for listening to episode 21 with our special guest, Andrew. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, no problem. I
This
look
was a very
forward
good
to-
episode.
Look forward to having Julia Miller on next time. That'll be exciting.
Dude, oh my god, I low key hope she doesn't take any issues with the fact that we name dropped her twice, but I'm sure she'll get over it.
Yeah, she'll be fine.
You can totally come on the show, Julia. Don't be shy.
All right, well, thanks for listening. You can listen on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, all your favorite podcasting platforms, and now YouTube. Make sure to like, subscribe to all of our channels. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.